welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 354, and today's date is April 30th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Fed Blames Bad Economy on the Weather. Please believe us, the economy is recovering. Well, no, it is not. It is not recovering. And what we're seeing is everything completely falling apart in front of our eyes. And every single government official, the Fed, of course the Fed is not part of the government, is telling us that it is the weather. That is why the economy is completely falling apart. Because we had cold weather, we had a couple of snowstorms, it completely wreaked havoc on the economy of the United States. And this is why we see all these retail stores closing. This is why people aren't buying homes. This is why people aren't applying for refinancing. This is why online sales is not... Wait a minute, online sales? That has nothing to do with the weather. You're sitting home in your house. So really, this makes no sense whatsoever what they're talking about. The weather. We understand the weather is not the same in every part of the country. And I hate to say it, the winter is always cold. The winter has snow, and the snow doesn't last for 2, 3, 4 weeks in a row. It snows 1 or 2 days. They come, they plow, they salt. You can drive around. I hate to say it, even during a blizzard, you can still drive around. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can still drive around, and the next day you wake up, the snow is removed, salt's put on the ground, especially in the heavy populated areas. So all of this propaganda about the weather bringing the economy down is completely just that, propaganda, because they can't understand why all of this is not working anymore. Why aren't the people buying the homes? We pumped the markets back up. How come they're not running to purchase the homes? How come they're not selling their homes? Where are the people to buy all the electronics and the furniture? They can't be found. What is going on here? They don't understand the American people and what they're really going through. They don't realize, because of all the manipulation and everything else that's going on, that the economy is falling apart. Or do they really understand this? And they're using this illusion to convince everyone that we are in a recovery. I think this is what they're really doing. They're telling, they're showing, they're manipulating, and trying to convince everyone that the weather was to blame. We are in a recovery. Don't worry. Everything's fine. We are not forecasting any type of recession/depression. All we see is the economy is going to get better. You're all going to have jobs. Everyone's going to own a home, and everyone's housing prices will go up. Everyone will be able to pay for college. Don't you worry. Let us handle this. This is what they're trying to do. This is what they're trying to create. And they tried to do this prior to 2008. And it completely fell apart. Even during the year they were telling us there was no recession forecasted for 2008, there was a recession. They told us the subprime was contained. Well, we learned it wasn't. We understood that the housing market and the housing prices, they normally don't fall. We don't see a problem with this. The housing prices, the housing market imploded. We are seeing the same exact thing happen right now as it did prior to 2008. And they're coming up with the same exact excuses, the same exact recovery illusion statements that they used back then. Let's get into the economic collapse news and what we're seeing out in Japan. And of course we know they raised the sales tax and they brought it up to make ends meet for the government. And what they're seeing is they're seeing a problem. Japanese manufacturer firms saw a decline in output for the first time in 14 months in April. Alongside this fall in output was a deterioration in new orders, which also decreased for the first time in 14 months. In both cases, firms linked the reduction, of course, to the sales tax rise. Well, maybe That's part of it, but the economies of the private Western central banks are starting to implode on themselves. This is what is happening at this time. This is what we're seeing all over the place. But remember, all eyes on the stock market. It's going up. Don't worry about it. Gold is coming down. Everything is great. Now, ADP came out with their numbers, and even though April's not over yet, they're saying that they've beat expectation on private jobs right now. They were expecting 210,000. They're seeing about 220. But we have to go back in time, and it looks like they started revising their numbers from February and March. And what I realized with the BLS, with ADP, they always seem to go backwards, revise their numbers much, much lower than they first reported, but they never really say anything. And if we look back in February, they revised the numbers down to 139,000. If we go back to March, it looks like they went from like 209 down to 191,000. And they continually do this, and we will see them do this for April. They're telling us that it beat expectations, and it looks great. The next month, what they'll do is they'll bring it below expectations because it was completely an illusion. This was not real data, and they always seem to correct themselves a month later. The same thing happens with the BLS, but no one really knows about it. Nobody really says anything. And right now what we're seeing is the GDP only grew by 0.1% in the first quarter. And of course, that has to do with the weather. No, it doesn't. It has nothing to do with the weather. Right now, they thought the GDP was going to grow by 1.2%. Of course, Goldman Sachs was out there saying that, first quarter is going to be about 3%, and they were completely off the mark, completely. And we can see that the U.S. economy is really not growing the way they thought it was going to be growing. And the only reason that it was at 0.1% of growth is because of Obamacare. If it wasn't for the government-mandated spending surge resulting from Obamacare, which resulted in the biggest jump in health care services, the spending in the past quarter added up to about 1.1% of GDP. So the real first quarter GDP would have been a negative 1% without Obamacare, uninsuring all those people who had insurance, forcing them into Obamacare, and pushing up the numbers. This is why we saw a positive GDP. Otherwise, it would be a negative 1% GDP. And actually, we really need to look back. For those who don't know, and I've said this many times in the report, GDP was changed. They go back to 1929. They included other things like research and development, and they recalculated GDP all the way up to this time because they realized that these numbers were not fitting their illusion. And they did the same thing with unemployment. They did the same thing with inflation. They continually modify the calculations to fit the illusion of the economy. And when it starts looking like it's not fitting anymore, they make up some type of an excuse. They go back, they recalculate them, and they let us know that, look, everything's positive again. See, the economy's growing. But realistically, it's not growing. And of course, Goldman Sachs is out there saying, well, we're seeing that the second quarter is going to be around 3%. And you know what? It most likely will not. I mean, we're going to see a little bump maybe in real estate, but consumer spending and everything like that, we're really not going to see much happening there. Stores are closing. People just don't have the money to spend. More and more people are being laid off. More companies are being laying off people. More stores are closing. So what we're actually going to see is many people on unemployment. Many people who have severance packages will eventually run out by the end of the summer. They'll still be looking for work. And again, looking for work in the summer usually is a really bad time. Most people are on vacation, and you're not going to see much happen during this time. Real estate, on the other hand, this is a very big time for real estate, spring and summer. We might see a tiny little pop because of the subprime, adjustable rate mortgages, the lowering of the down payments, giving loans to anyone that has a pulse, and we might see something happen there. But overall, the economy is not improving. And as we go throughout the year, you'll see the economy completely collapse. And again, they will not be able to explain this. They'll explain, it'll be the sun, it's too bright, it's too cloudy. They'll make up many, many different excuses, and this is why they will need some type of an event to cover all of this up. And they're going to have to do something, so all eyes are off the central bankers, the Fed, the U.S. government, and all eyes are on the other country that caused this situation. Now, there was a report that came out from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and it said the two mortgage finance giants, which have already taken about $187.5 billion in taxpayer aid since 2008, would need more funds to stay afloat if home prices plummeted in a severe downturn. Now, what we are seeing right now is a severe downturn. Things are starting to completely fall apart in the housing market. We're seeing that the prices of homes are starting to come down. We understand that mortgages, first-time buyers, refinancing, all plummeting. And we are seeing that the American people are completely tapped out and they just cannot buy these houses. So we're going to see the real estate market completely fall apart, and they know it. They don't even have an explanation of why this is happening. But we have to remember that they already knew this way, way back. The main mortgage companies like J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, they've been laying people off in their mortgage departments since August of 2013. And I discussed this back in the time when they were blaming Syria for the chemical weapon attack. They were using the false flag, and at the same time, mortgage companies were laying off people. And if you go back to those reports back to August, September, October, you'll hear me talk about that, how they were laying off tens of thousands of people from these departments. And other mortgage companies were actually closing their doors because, again, if the housing market is rebounding, recovering, we would see mortgage departments expand because more people need loans. I'm sorry, but most Americans do not have the cash to purchase these homes. Yes, big investment companies and hedge funds that are receiving free money from the Fed to pump up the market, they have the cash. A lot of investors outside of the country coming into this country might have the cash, but the everyday American does not have the cash to purchase these homes. This is why they go get a mortgage. And for all these mortgage companies to start laying off or closing their doors, we realize that this recovery is not there. If we are truly in a recovery, they wouldn't have to lower the down payments. They wouldn't have to give, in some places, 100% financing. They wouldn't say that we'll give subprime borrowers mortgages. They wouldn't have to do any of this. Now, the Fed had their meeting today, and they decided that they're going to taper once again. Well, of course they are. The economy is improving. It's recovering. The Fed is going to taper bond buying to $45 billion monthly pace from $55 billion. The Fed economy picked up, consumer demand rising more quickly. The economy slowed due to weather, of course, to consumer spending is rising more quickly. The Fed is in full consensus that everything is going to be all right. Don't worry, everyone. Everything will be fine. They are not forecasting any type of problem in the near future. So everything seems to be good. And of course, they'll be funneling and channeling that extra bond buying money off to Belgium. And we will look at Belgium a little bit later on, down, a couple weeks from now, to see if they had a little bump up in the amount that they're spending in treasury bonds, just like they were since the time the Fed announced tapering, which this is really not a tapering whatsoever. And we will see what happens during that time period. And of course, we look all around and they're telling us that everything is fine, all right. Everything is improving, but let's look at some of the facts here. And this is coming out of the Economic Collapse blog. Home ownership rate in the United States has dropped to the lowest in 19 years. Well, that looks like a recovery. Consumer spending for durable goods has dropped by 3.23% since November. I mean, during the holiday season when spending is supposed to be going up. Very odd. Major retailers are closing stores at the fastest pace we have seen since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. What? If more people have work, why aren't they spending their money? Well, because the BLS numbers, the unemployment numbers of 6.7%, are an illusion. Remember, if you haven't been on an interview in 4 weeks, they don't count you anymore. If you have 1, 2, 3, 4 part-time jobs, that's counted as 1, 2, 3 jobs. So we can see how they're manipulating this number. And also, they don't count those people who no longer are looking or just can't find one because they're saying there's nothing out there, but they're continually sending out resumes. I know quite a few people that are still doing this. According to the BLS statistics, 20% of all families in the United States do not have a single member that is employed. That means 1 out of every 5 families in the entire country is completely unemployed. There are 1.3 million fewer jobs in the U.S. economy than when the last recession began in 2007. Very interesting. According to a new report from the National Employment Law Project, the quality of jobs that have been created since the end of the last recession does not match the quality of jobs during the last recession. It is hard to believe, but 62% of all Americans make $20 or less an hour at this point. According to one recent study, 40% of all Americans could not come up with $2,000 right now, even if there was a major emergency. And I'm not talking about using your credit cards. We're talking about cash. An astounding 56% of all Americans have subprime credit in 2014. Well, that makes sense because we went through the 2008 crash. 38% of the people lost their wealth, and the amount of foreclosures and short sales and people who couldn't pay their credit cards all lost their credit rating. So how do you expect these people, even if they have a job, to go out and purchase a home? And you understand now why they want to give mortgages to subprime people. 69% of the federal budget is spent either on entitlements or on welfare programs. The number of Americans receiving benefits from the federal government each month exceeds the number of full-time workers in the private sector by more than 60 million. So this looks like a complete recovery to me. It looks like we're headed in the right direction. The Fed is right. Everything is going to be all right. Seriously. I mean, can you believe what they are telling us? But wait, let's go back to 2008. Ben Bernanke told us that the Fed is not forecasting a recession anytime in the future. And 8 months later, the stock market crashed. We were in a recession. Housing crumbled. So, like I said, everything a government official tells us, or the Fed, because they're not part of the government, it is the complete opposite. Be prepared for an economic collapse. Now, China is going to become the world's dominant economy this year, and this is according to the World Bank. China may pass the U.S. and become the world's most important economy this year. According to the World Bank, it would take the position the U.S. has held since 1872. The Chinese economy may be 20% larger than official figures show. It may have overtaken the U.S. several years ago. Now, we can see what's happening. China is making deals all across the globe, bilateral trade deals. They're setting up clearinghouses for the yuan, and many countries are starting to add yuan to their reserves, and they're lowering the reserves of the U.S. dollar. And we understand that the U.S. dollar reserves has dropped since 2000 from 55% all the way down to this point in time to 33%. By the end of this year, they're saying that most of the countries and central banks will hold about only 20 to 25% of the U.S. dollar in reserves. And we can see the rise of the yuan, we can see the rise of the ruble, and this is a direct threat to the U.S. dollar, and the central bankers are not going to let this happen. They rather start a war. They will create an event to take all eyes off of what has been happening and put it on another country so they can start World War III to completely mask this horrific economic collapse that is coming. This is their plan. Will they succeed in starting some type of war? Well, we will have to see. And if they cannot provoke a country to do this, they will provoke it and do it themselves with a false flag event here in the United States. Now, what we are seeing with Obamacare, and if you listen to me before, you understand, I am not a fan of Obamacare. It is a complete cash grab. It's intertwined with taxes. They've put penalties on it, so those people who do not want Obamacare still have to pay some type of tax. And again, I always come back to this. If this was so great for the people, the president, the entire Congress needed to sit down in front of every single news station, log on to Obamacare, and they should have all signed up and shown the American people how great this is. But most of them, actually, all of them did not do this, and most of them decided to keep their government insurance because it is 1,000 times better than the crap that they're throwing at us. These aren't true leaders, because a true leader, when they're telling you to do something, they would do it first to show you, yes, this is great. This is what we're telling you we need everyone to do because we are telling you it is fantastic. They did not do this. These are not leaders. And there was a survey done for Obamacare, a poll of uninsured Americans. They still think Obamacare is too expensive. 57% of respondents believe that there have been so many problems since the law's rollout that it's clear the law is not working as planned. The Congressional Budget Office predicts that 31 million Americans will remain uninsured. Why? They don't have jobs. Obamacare is too expensive. It's cheaper to pay the penalty than to actually have health insurance at this time and pay these premiums, because you have to remember these deductibles in Obamacare are very high, and most of the people will not even hit their deductible, and when they come to the end of the year and they've never hit the deductible, all they did was pay for the premium, and when the year starts again, it resets the deductible and you start from zero again, and you have to reach that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 number again. So the primary reason Americans are staying uninsured is still the cost of health care. Health insurance is too expensive, according to 39% of uninsured respondents. 22% of respondents blame job-related factors, such as recently losing a job. And we're going to see this happen quite often here, where people are being laid off. They can't stay on COBRA. They can't afford Obamacare because they do not have work. And we're going to see more and more people stay uninsured. And if they do get a job, a good paying job, most of the time companies will pay for their insurance. If they get a part-time job, they will not make enough money to pay for this insurance, so they will stay uninsured, and they rather pay the penalty because the amount of money that they're bringing in is not all that high. So we can see Obamacare is a complete flop. It is not doing what they're saying, and of course they spent tons of money on Obamacare, and what we're seeing is, we understand that the Obamacare website was a complete disaster. It doesn't work. I mean, they can say whatever they want. It really does not work. And they spent about $93 million just on the website, and the contractor who's going to fix the website is saying that it's going to cost $121 million to fix it and make it work properly. So they're going to spend more money to fix it than it was to create it. This whole thing is a complete disaster, and it is costing more and more money. And let me tell you, this $200 million, this could have been spent in other areas instead of a website which nobody wants to use, and the American people are not for this Obamacare insurance. So you know what, this money could have been spent so many different places than what they're spending it on right now. Now, Putin is out there, and he is saying that Washington is completely behind everything that's happening in Ukraine. The U.S. has been behind the Ukraine crisis from the beginning, but was initially flying low, Russian President Putin said. I think what is happening now shows us who really was mastering the process from the beginning. But in the beginning, the United States preferred to remain in the shadow, Putin said. Putin stated that since the U.S. has taken a lead role in resolving the political crisis in Ukraine. It is telling that they originally were behind this process, but now they have emerged as the leader. So we just need to take a look at this for a second. The United States is completely behind Ukraine. There were leaked phone conversations with Victoria Nuland discussing who they were going to put into power, and this was a month or two before the coup d'etat. We already had the CIA, Joe Biden, the FBI, all in Ukraine. We can see they voted to send over $1 billion to Ukraine. United States government is continually putting on sanctions on personal Russian diplomats and on some businesses. So you can see the United States is completely driving this entire mess that they created in Ukraine. It is not going the way they thought. Their plan is completely messed up. They did not capture Ukraine. They didn't have what they wanted. It's not part of NATO. It's really not part of EU because they're missing Crimea, and soon they will be missing the southeastern portion of Ukraine. So the whole thing is completely falling apart, and they don't even know what to do at this point, and this is why they're continually provoking Russia, because they rather start something than admit that they're wrong, and they rather have a war than admit that, oh, this was a mess, this was a complete mess, and we don't know how to get out of it at this time. Now, Putin is also out there saying that the second set of U.S. sanctions against Russia not related to the situation in Ukraine. The EU's new sanctions against Russia can be explained by the fact that Europe is trying to find those responsible for the process in the ongoing Ukraine problems. But the new EU sanctions against Russia occur as Europe is trying to find someone to blame for the processes taking place in Ukraine. As for the second set, it is not even clear what it's about. I can hardly explain what the reason for it is, because there is no link between what is happening now in Ukraine and Russia, Putin told reporters. And we can see what is happening right here. And right now, they don't know what to do, so they're just placing these ridiculous sanctions on individuals and corporations, showing the world like, yeah, we're doing something. We completely messed up Ukraine. It's a disaster right now. They're in debt. The people are suffering. We have problems, and we don't know what we're doing at this point. And we can see that they're messed up in Ukraine. The Middle East is falling apart, and they're having problems in Central Africa. And Putin was out there saying that U.S.-run processes in Ukraine since very start. Putin also said no Russian troops or instructors in Ukraine. Western sanctions will have no impact on Eurasian integration, and Putin said that also. So we can see what is happening here. It is completely falling apart. Now, of course, the International Monetary Fund is out there saying, you know what, because of what's happening and everything that's going on, we're going to say that Russia is experiencing a recession now because of damage caused by Ukrainian crisis. Yeah, the IMF is telling the world which countries are having a problem. I mean, they are continually telling the world that Spain is coming out of their recession. They're continually telling the world that Cyprus is fine, Greece is fine, France is fine, Italy is fine. All is not fine. They are completely imploding on themselves. Unemployment is continually going up. The IMF was even out there with the first tranche of bailouts to Greece, saying that the whole thing with Greece is said and done. They are on a recovery. And here they are in their third tranche of bailouts. Unemployment is skyrocketing. Youth unemployment is at 60-something%. Adult unemployment is around 30%. It is getting worse for the people. They're having protests, so they have no idea what they're talking about. They're misleading everyone to make it seem like Russia is having problems. And let me just tell you, Russia has a very strong manufacturing. They supply natural gas to many countries. There are a lot of European businesses in Russia. There are many U.S. businesses in Russia, and this is why they haven't placed sanctions on Russia, because it would have a catastrophic effect on Europe and the United States. Both of these Europe and the United States, both of them are so fragile right now. One little hiccup, they will completely implode on themselves, and they realize this. Now, in Donetsk, we understand that they're going to have a referendum, and they're saying right now that they're not going to participate in the presidential elections in Ukraine, which are really not open elections. They've already picked the people they want to handle the puppet government, and everyone they pick to run is part of this plan. So there's really no open election at this time. It's in a complete illusion. They already know who they want in power, and they have to keep a puppet government in place, just like in Lebanon, Libya, Iraq, Yemen. They're all puppet governments, and they need to keep all these puppet governments in power. They cannot let the people actually have an election and overthrow the government they need in there to keep control of using the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency and keeping the private Western Central Bank in these countries. And what we're seeing is the people are saying that we're having a referendum come May 11th, and we will no longer be part of Ukraine. This is how positive they are, and we will not need to vote in these elections. Now, Ukraine's economy is falling apart. They lose about 1.1% in quarter one of their GDP, and it is completely declining at this point. It looks like they're following the same route as Greece and Cyprus and all the other IMF European nations that are helping these countries. So we can see what's happening right now. They are blanketed with debt. They have no industry. People are suffering. Unemployment's going to be going up. Costs are going to be going up, and we're just going to see a major, major problem. Now, Ukrainian armed forces are put on alert. Ukrainian armed forces are put on combat alert. I am once again addressing the real danger of the start of a continental war against Ukraine by the Russian Federation. Our armed forces have been put on full combat alert, and this is coming from the acting president at this time. And of course, this is all propaganda to make it seem like Russia's invading Ukraine, which they are not. They're already moving back their troops that they were having on the border. They're moving that back. They never invaded Crimea. Those troops were stationed there with the agreement of Ukraine, just like every other country that has bases in other countries. They have troops that are already there. They're not invading. It was part of an agreement. And we can see how this propaganda is being pushed forward. And as we know, John Kerry said that they've captured agent provocateurs, and they also have recordings of Moscow talking to Ukrainian spies or agents, and they've never have produced any of this. So I'm chalking that up to propaganda at this time until they can show the world what they're talking about. And so far, we have seen nothing. And of course, they're hiding behind national security and everything else that they always use when they really can't prove something. Now, the acting government in Ukraine right now is saying that they really lost control of the East. Ukraine's acting president has admitted his government has practically lost control of the East of the country, with his security forces helpless to stop a rolling takeover by the people of Donetsk, and it's just not going anywhere at this time. But don't you worry, because their anti-terrorism forces have been pushed forward. They're intensifying, and they're doing everything they possibly can to push down these terrorists, which are really the people of Ukraine that don't want to be part of this puppet regime. Now, when Donetsk has this referendum, they are inviting observers in. They want people to see the election process, so there are no problems there. And they have plenty of groups that's saying that they want to come in and take a look at the election process. Donetsk is setting up around 2,000 polling stations. They are ready to go, and I believe they're having the referendum around May 11th at this time. Now, Kerry is out there. He is saying that the U.S. military will defend every inch of NATO territory. Well, Ukraine is not part of NATO, so what are they talking about? What is he talking about? Europe? I don't understand what he's saying. In a speech today in Washington, which was presented as a warning to Russia, Secretary of State John Kerry warned Russia would not be allowed to change the security landscape of Europe, and the U.S. was prepared to defend every single piece of NATO territory. Well, of course he's using this as propaganda, letting everyone know that he believes that Russia is going to start invading Europe. This is not happening at all. This is complete propaganda to build it up that Russia is making a move. And if you notice from the beginning, nothing has happened. There are no troops in Crimea, invading Crimea, taking it over. There are no troops on the border. We had an NBC crew drive 1,200 miles up and down. We also had German, France, U.S. fly over the border in the open air treaty to see if there were troop buildup. And of course, we had the NATO satellite images showing that there was troop buildup. But of course, that was debunked. That was in August 2013 satellite photo of a Russian drill. So all of this is complete fake. It is propaganda, and they're continually putting it out there. Now, the United States, right now, the State Department says there's a surge in aggressive al-Qaeda affiliates in the Middle East and North Africa, and it poses a serious threat to U.S. interests and allies. This is what I've been talking about. The Middle East is falling apart. Now, of course, they're saying there's a surge of al-Qaeda. Yes, the people in Yemen, the people in Libya, the people in Iraq, the people in Lebanon, they are all fighting back. It is getting worse. Drones are not enough anymore. The people are making their move. They want their countries back. The Libyan people have gone in and pretty much removed the government at this time, and this is why the United States says if the Libyan government, the puppet regime, cannot control the situation, we will bring in international forces to control the situation, because the biggest fear of the central banker is to have all these countries overrun by the people, remove the private Western Central Bank, and remove the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. Once this happens, this is the problem, because other countries would no longer need to keep the U.S. dollar in their reserves to pay for the oil. If they do not need to keep it, that money will flow back to the United States. We will see sharp increases of goods. We will see milk, gas, food completely rise. And I'm not talking about 30, 40, 50 cents. I'm talking $8, $10, $12. We will see things increase, and this is why I've been saying prepare with food, with water, because as prices rise, you want to make sure that you can afford what is going on here. And if you have stockpiles of food, you can outlast this. And I'm not saying for 2 or 3 weeks. You should have been preparing all along. And of course, they're out there saying that the State Department said Wednesday that losses in al-Qaeda's core leadership in Pakistan, Afghanistan have accelerated the network's decentralization. That results in more autonomous and more aggressive affiliates that are now in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Africa, Libya, Lebanon, and you can see they are building their case, because now they're going to use international troops, NATO, UN, to go in and try to maintain control of these countries, because this is their biggest fear. Now, there was a poll that was done with Americans, and they wanted to know if Americans wanted to go to war, or should we be involved in Ukraine, Syria, or any of these countries. And right now, the American people are saying that we should not be involved. We should reduce our role in world affairs. Even as a showdown with Russia over Ukraine preoccupies Washington, the American people are saying we should not be involved in any of this. And right now, a YouGov poll says that only 14% of Americans said that the U.S. has any responsibility to get involved in Ukraine. And 18% think the U.S. has any responsibility to protect Ukraine if Russia were to invade. So the people of America do not want to be involved anywhere in the world at this time, especially if there is war on the agenda here. We see it in Syria, we see it in Ukraine, The American people are saying, no, let's step back. We should not be involved. And this is a huge, huge problem for the government, the central bankers, because they realize no matter what they do out there, the American people will not go to war. And the only way to get the American people and get them ready to go to war is to do something to make it seem like one of these countries has attacked the United States. And the only way to do that is with a false flag event. Now, they have two things going on here. One, they need to start this war to cover up the economic collapse. Two, they need to get the American people moved by something that happens here. So what they can do is they can bring a false flag event here, either from Syria, which I most likely think maybe Russia, China, but right now it looks like it's going to be Syria. And they can have something that happens here, a cyber attack, some type of chemical weapon. We understand that they've cut funding for a nuclear task force for DHS in New York. We understand that they're not putting up the bio scanners. They're not funding that, and they're doing all of this on purpose because they don't want to detect anything. They want this false flag to happen. We also understand that the kill switches for NASDAQ, stock exchange, and the BAT system are all in place to shut the systems down at a certain point, and we understand that the Fed will be ready to ramp up quantitative easing. It'll be much easier to blame another country for this economic collapse than to blame the U.S. government, the government officials, and the Fed. And this is why they are going to do this, because they realize these polls are not coming back the way they want. They want the American people to say, let's go to war. This is not happening whatsoever. But Tony Blair is out there in a speech delivered in London last Wednesday. Former Labour Party leader, British Prime Minister Tony Blair urged a renewed focus on the imperialist powers on the Middle East, including further military engagements, because they realize they are losing control of the Middle East and they need to get back in there. And this is why they're screaming this. Now, Western intelligence says Assad plans to retain residual chemical weapons capabilities. Now, we've seen this, and I've mentioned this many, many times. They are out there saying that Assad has chemical and biological weapons hidden someplace, and he's going to use them. And they are very worried that he might use them here in the United States. And right now, they've been removing the chemical weapons. 92% of the Syrian chemical weapons have been dismantled, and they are trying to remove the rest of the chemical weapons, and of course the rebels are stopping the UN and the team from removing the chemical weapons. Now, the rebels right now, who receive the anti-tank, anti-aircraft guns, who've been training in Jordan and Qatar, have made their move on Homs, and they've really attacked that area. About 100 people died already, and this is on the cusp of the elections coming up in June. So you can see they are making the push now. They are pushing, and they're using the propaganda that Assad might use biological or chemical weapons. The United States is also out there saying that there's a new generation of global terrorists. The worldwide terror threat is evolving as al-Qaeda-linked groups and other militants become increasingly violent, and a new generation of global terrorists is spawned in Syria, the U.S. warned Wednesday. Now, we can see what they are doing. They are building this propaganda up because they want the American people to realize that there are terrorists out there, there are lone wolf groups, there are bomb makers. We don't know where they are. They can't be tracked. Even Americans can be radicalized and turned into terrorists. And this is why we've seen the arrests of a National Guard person who was reading the Inspire magazine from al-Qaeda on how to create bombs. They've been going to the website, so they arrested those people to show that, yes, see, even Americans can become terrorists. And the terrorist threat continued to evolve rapidly in 2013 with an increasing number of groups around the world, including both AQ affiliates and other terrorist organizations, posing a threat to the United States, our allies, and our interests. So they are building the propaganda. They want you to understand that there is some type of terrorist threat. They want the American people to realize it's coming from Syria. They want everyone to realize that when this hits, we will know where it came from. We will understand from all the propaganda that it was al-Qaeda, it came from Syria, it was the Syrian electronic army that cyber attacked the financial system. Iran might have helped them. Russia could have been involved because they're in league with Syria, so they can put this whole thing together. We might even see the return of the Malaysian flight. We might even see that plane fly in with a nuclear payload, a biological payload, a chemical payload, just to show that they captured that plane, they used it, they retrofitted it, and they flew it here to the United States. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.